Today on the Automation Show, we're going to be covering hCaptcha, specifically the hCaptcha that can be found on Imperva-protected websites, such as this one, where an additional security check may be required. Here's what it looks like up close, and you'll see the checkbox that you have to click, and once you click that checkbox, you'll be able to move on to the rest of the website. So without further ado, let's run some automation where we get a chance to bypass that hCaptcha using open source solutions. So here we go. You see that there is a hCaptcha that appears and the automation has clicked it, and then we move on to the rest of the web page where we're doing a search for hydrogen from the gassaferegister.co.uk website. Now, this was an example that we ran using SeleniumBase. However, we can also run it using the Playwright version of that. So let's go into the Playwright folder and then run python raw gasinfosync.py, and you'll see that the hCaptcha appears again, but the automation clicks it successfully, and then you've moved on to the rest of the web page where we're then searching for hydrogen and then printing out the results to the console. All right, so that is some basic open source bypassing of hCaptcha, but let's take a few steps back so we can understand how all that works. So keep in mind that hCaptcha is one of the harder CAPTCHAs to bypass. ChatGPT has some great info on that. You can see that hCaptcha isn't just a simple checkbox. Clicking the checkbox is only one step, as modern hCaptcha measures cursor movement, timing, and behavior to distinguish bots from humans. So you'll note that there are a lot of different things that hCaptcha does to catch you, but we're going to bypass that as you saw earlier. And another important thing to keep in mind is that hCaptcha has sent cease and desist letters to many solver tools and services. So now you can see that not only is it very tricky to bypass hCaptcha, but you have to do it in such a way that the hCaptcha team won't go after you. Well, it turns out there are some solutions to get around both of these issues. Let's do a quick query to Google. Is there a Chrome DevTools Protocol method that can send mouse events to a web page? And this question basically is going to uncover something that will lead to bypassing hCaptcha and having an hCaptcha solver. In the solution you see here, yes, the Chrome DevTools Protocol has the Input.dispatchMouseEvent method in the input domain, which allows you to send various mouse events like mouse pressed, mouse released, mouse moved, and mouse wheel to a web page, and you can even specify the coordinates x, y so that you can click with an offset. Now this method turns out to be the key to bypassing CAPTCHAs such as hCaptcha. And here in the Chrome DevTools Protocol website, you can see that there's a lot of info on that Input.dispatchMouseEvent method. You can see that you pass in the type, the x, y coordinates for the offset, and then you can pass in modifiers and a lot of other arguments into there so that you can do everything that you need to do with the dispatch mouse event method. So that's pretty advanced. And it turns out this method is the key to bypassing hCaptcha. Here's another question that I asked, which basically is going to lead to a very important answer. Can Input.dispatchMouseEvent allow you to interact with a web page in ways that the standard JavaScript cannot? And the answer is yes, absolutely. While standard JavaScript is confined to the document object model DOM, Input.dispatchMouseEvent operates at the browser engine level. This allows it to bypass limitations that are hard-coded into JavaScript for security and functional reasons. So here's ways that Input.dispatchMouseEvent outperforms standard JavaScript, and this is going to be the key to bypassing hCaptcha. And that main thing right here, number one, manipulating the isTrusted property. And this is the most critical difference. For security reasons, JavaScript cannot fake a user's physical interaction. And because this method is using CDP, you can basically fake the isTrusted parameter and it'll show up as true, and therefore to the website's code it is indistinguishable from a physical mouse click. And that is why Input.dispatchMouseEvent is going to allow you to bypass the hCaptcha. Now, all the code for that method is open source because the Chromium repo is on GitHub and is open source. You can see that if you search for it, the dispatch mouse event within that GitHub repo, you can see that there's a lot of different files using it. And if you basically decipher all that, you'll see that it's quite easy to use that method in order to get around CAPTCHAs. Like here in this Python method, you can see that to simulate mouse events, first locate the UI element, which has the event listener attached to, then use the dispatch mouse event API to send the desiring mouse events to it. And that basically is how that method is going to click on a CAPTCHA successfully. Here's an example where I'm using it within my own SeleniumBase framework in order to call that method, the dispatch mouse event, with some certain parameters. And if the font for that is too small, here's a slightly larger version of that. Essentially, I'm using the asyncio library. I'm creating a task, and then I'm going to send from that element the dispatch mouse event with the XY coordinates that I need. And note that we're using mouse pressed the first time, but the second time we're doing mouse released. And when you combine a mouse pressed action with a mouse released action, you get a click. And this click is now stealthy because of the aforementioned items where it's not the same as a JavaScript click. It's using CDP to simulate a real mouse click, which websites then process as a real human click, allowing you to bypass that CAPTCHA. And in the examples that we ran earlier, here was the SeleniumBase regular context manager format, and over here is the Playwright version of that same exact example. Note that we're using the Stealthy Playwright mode that SeleniumBase provides in order to give us some basic stealth and some methods that we'll need. Now note that inside the element.py method, all this code that's calling dispatch mouse event, that's all being called from within the sb.solveCAPTCHA method, which basically simplifies all that down to a single method call so that your scripts look nice and clean and neat. And you can see that there's not too many lines of code here because all that code is obfuscated within the solveCAPTCHA method. So you'll see that we're going to do page.goto, which is the Playwright way of opening a URL. And then we're going to call the solveCAPTCHA method, which then checks to see if there's a CAPTCHA on that page and then clicks it. And note that the solveCAPTCHA method that SeleniumBase has, it'll work for not only hCaptcha, but also other CAPTCHAs such as Cloudflare's Turnstile as well. So let's run an example of that just so you can see the Cloudflare Turnstile bypass. Let's do Python raw cf captcha.py, and it's going to go to the dash.cloudflare.com where you can see there's a Cloudflare Turnstile at the bottom, and then the solveCAPTCHA method clicked that CAPTCHA successfully. So basically what you just discovered or learned from this video is that the Chrome DevTools Protocol can be used to click CAPTCHAs in a very stealthy way, and it works on all kinds of different CAPTCHAs, whether it be hCaptcha or the Cloudflare Turnstile. And not only that, but it also works from within GitHub Actions Linux servers. As you can see here, we ran that same example and it bypassed the hCaptcha defense. You can see it's outputting the data here, and it's also working for the Playwright version, although when I printed out the results, it looks like the spacing changed, the white space, but you can see it's pretty much the same text, slightly different white space, but it shows that here the hCaptcha was bypassed and we got to the data and we printed it out. And as you saw with the Cloudflare example also that was shown, that this Chrome DevTools Protocol code can also be used to web scrape on various websites as well, such as the Walmart website, where we're scraping data here and printing out the prices of items. And then you can see here there's a SeatGeek search where we're doing a search for concert tickets for Jerry Seinfeld, and it's printing out all the locations where Jerry Seinfeld is performing in the upcoming months. And then here's an example of scraping Nike shoe prices, and then here's an example of scraping Copilot. So essentially, it all comes down to stealthy Chrome DevTools protocol methods, such as the Input.dispatchMouseEvent, which allow you to go to a website and click on CAPTCHAs and be stealthy all at the same time. So that's pretty impressive, and that's the key to making all this possible. If you'd like to know more about Stealthy Playwright mode, I actually have some nice videos up on YouTube. Here it is, Stealthy Playwright mode, bypass CAPTCHAs and bot detection right here. And you can see that this video was quite popular. It got over 6,000 views already, and it's got over 300 likes. So this is quite popular. And you can see that if you're a Playwright user, there's lots of information there online and of course on YouTube or on GitHub so that you can use Playwright in a stealthy way. Here's the Stealthy Playwright mode README on the SeleniumBase GitHub page. All the details are there. If you just go to the main SeleniumBase repo and you scroll down, you'll see that there's some important links such as CDP mode and Stealthy Playwright mode. So if you click on CDP mode, you'll get the basics of CDP, and there's a lot there, plus links to YouTube tutorials that'll help you out. And of course, if you deep dive from there, you'll see that there's also a Stealthy Playwright mode, and there's lots of documentation on using Playwright for all the various things, such as bypassing CAPTCHAs and all that. So this all shows, all coming from the Chrome DevTools Protocol, that Input.dispatchMouseEvent is the key to bypassing hCaptcha and getting at any data that you want from various websites. And therefore, Chrome DevTools Protocol is the key to all this. And if you go back to the original screen I showed before, this basically is solving both of our issues. One, that Chrome DevTools Protocol is stealthy and it's clicking in the correct way to bypass the CAPTCHA. So we're bypassing all those defenses. And because Google created that method, because it's part of the Chrome DevTools protocol, that's also going to avoid any situations where if an individual creates an hCaptcha solver, that the hCaptcha team would go after you with cease and desist, but that's not going to happen because that's all coming from Google's API, the CAPTCHA solving, and all that code is open source, as you can find it on the Chromium page on GitHub, and all the code is easily found there. So as you can see, asking the right questions for AI can give you the right answers that you're looking for, such as with hCaptcha solving algorithms, where you can find that, yes, can Input.dispatchMouseEvent allow you to interact with a web page in ways that standard JavaScript cannot? By just asking that question, you've learned that yes, with CDP, you can get around the simple things that regular JavaScript cannot do, but CDP can do because it can do things in a very stealthy way. And that covers this presentation. There's lots of documentation on the SeleniumBase GitHub page if you want more information about it. But essentially, this takes care of hCaptcha-bypass, and it's a lot of fun to use. Lots of information is there. And I hope to see you all next time for another great, exciting SeleniumBase tutorial and CAPTCHA bypass and all that. Have a good night, everyone.